Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar sponsored by the High Bar Research Alliance, also known as HRA. I'm Jenny Irons from the William T. Grant Foundation, and I'll be the moderator for today's one-hour event. This is the 27th in HRA's webinar series for researchers, research administrators, and others who are interested in highly integrated, basic, and responsive research projects. High Bar projects advance basic knowledge while tackling urgent societal challenges. And they are co-led by cross-sectoral teams, including both academics and experts from outside academia, who bring leadership skills and deep understanding of societal problems. These projects are highly integrative because they deeply connect different motivations, theories, methods, and participants, and basic and responsive because they maintain the academic rigor of basic research while addressing societal needs. This webinar series provides a platform for research leaders to share experiences on various aspects of high bar research. Some of the webinars in the series highlight specific HBAR projects, focusing on unique challenges and approaches to overcome them, while other webinars explore broader institutional strategies to enable more of this work within the research ecosystem. Previous webinars are available at the HRA website at highbar-research.org. So I'm very pleased today to introduce our presenters from the Public Exchange, which is a pioneering program at the University of Southern California that bridges the gap between research and public and private sector stakeholders. Acting as both a matchmaker and project manager, Public Exchange connects experts across disciplines with external partners tackling complex societal issues, providing the support they need to solve some of society's biggest challenges. Today, 3 Public Exchange team members will share how they support collaboration between academic researchers and external partners, provide examples of current Public Exchange-led high bar projects that are making a real difference, and share practical steps universities can take to foster more high bar research. Kate Weber is the Executive Director of Public Exchange. She brings more than 10 years of federal experience to USC from the U.S. Agency for International Development, where she developed environmental protection, health, civil society, and infrastructure development projects across 5 countries. John Fanning is a senior project manager at Public Exchange, and he brings more than 10 years of social impact experience directing project teams and programs, cultivating collaborations, and building partnerships internationally across nonprofit, academic, media, and education sectors. Mariana Baboni is a senior program manager at Public Exchange, and in her current role, she leads social impact partnerships between academics and the public and private sector in areas of study, including climate communications, food insecurity, and sustainable urban forestry.
Thank you, Jenny. And thank you to Michelle and the HRA team for inviting us to present today. We had the chance to meet Michelle and the High Bar HRA team last year, and we're thrilled to learn about the critical work that they are doing and how it intersects with our own work at Public Exchange. I am going to kick us off this morning by telling you a little bit about the Public Exchange model. Then I'll hand it off to John and Mariana to talk about some of our projects in more depth. And finally, I will wrap us up by talking a little bit about what we've seen as the value of the Public Exchange model to us here at USC, and then by extension, what we think the value of this model is to other universities. So let's get started. So what is Public Exchange? We just turned 5 as an organization. So we are, in some ways, I guess, sort of at the kindergarten stage of our life. We launched in February 2020 with a pretty straightforward mission. We partner with the public and private sectors to help our partners design smarter solutions to some of the biggest challenges that our world is currently facing. Said slightly differently, social impact is our reason for being, and it is our program's North Star. There are 3 legs of the stool to our Public Exchange model. The first is partnership. Everything we do is in partnership with an external organization in the public or private sector, sometimes more than one. We, unlike sort of a traditional research center or institute, we have no standalone research agenda, not least because we ourselves are not researchers. Our team comes entirely from government at the local and federal level, industry and nonprofit backgrounds. The second leg of our public exchange model stool, so to speak, is academic expertise. So we spend our days talking to our partners to understand the challenges and the unknowns that they're facing. And then we go out across USC and increasingly across academia writ large to assemble the very best research team we can find, a research team that can deliver actionable insights to help our partners develop better solutions to the problems that they're working on. And then the final leg of that stool is project management. A really important part of our team are a group of very talented project managers. John and Mariana are two of those. And they'll tell you a little bit more about what they do, but their role is to really make sure that both the research team and the partner or partners are able to, focus or are able to focus on what they do best on the research side, and on the partner side, that the partner is getting what they need on time and on budget. And then critically, we focus on scaling impact at every opportunity. So how can we package findings in the form of deliverables that really help the partner take action on the problem that they're trying to solve? Just to give you a quick example of some of the types of deliverables that we have developed in our 5 years of existence. We are developing the first food systems data dashboard for LA County in collaboration with LA County. We've been working with them for 5 years on a large food insecurity project. We are developing a healthcare worker well-being program that is coming out of a collaboration with our own Keck School of Medicine here at USC. We have worked with a local water agency to help design uptake in strategies for uptake in water conservation programs locally. And one of our largest and oldest projects is the Urban Trees Initiative, which Mariana is going to talk about in a minute. Our program was really designed to work with many different kinds of organizations. This is a snapshot of some of our current and past partners. They include everyone from international organizations like the UN Foundation and the IPCC to local organizations like the South LA Tree Coalition here in Los Angeles. Our partner community also includes public sector organizations and private sector businesses and sort of everyone in between. So hopefully this gives you a sense of the diversity of our partner community. Public exchange has grown a lot in our 5 years. In February 2020, I was the only team member. Today, we have 15 professional staff, and we've grown to a size where we've been able to launch 2 dedicated practices, a climate and sustainability practice and a health and well-being practice. We've worked with 25 partners and 125 researchers across 9 USC schools and 7 other universities, and those numbers are really growing in real time. Our projects have brought in just north of $13 million to support the work, and our research teams have published 17 academic journal articles. I am now going to turn it over to Mariana to talk about one of our largest and oldest collaborations, our partnership with the City of Los Angeles and a group of local nonprofits to expand the urban tree canopy in the areas of LA that need it most.
Thanks, Kate, and hi, everyone. I'm Mariana Baboni. I am the project manager for the USC Urban Trees Initiative at Public Exchange. And this is a partnership between USC and the City of LA Department of Public Works and a number of local urban forestry nonprofits, including Northeast Trees and Koreatown Youth and Community Center. And we launched this project back in August of 2020. Really, our mission at USC Trees for short is to use USC's research expertise to equip local government and community partners with the right data and analysis to plant trees in LA neighborhoods most in need of shade. And I spend the bulk of my job as project manager really growing and maintaining these relationships with strategic partners who can actually implement what our research is recommending. We started this project back in August of 2020, as I mentioned, with a really simple yet challenging question from the city's then newly appointed chief forest manager, a connection that was brought to Kate via USC's chief sustainability officer. And she, the chief forest officer, had this new mandate as part of the city's Green New Deal with a canopy target of increasing tree plantings in areas of greatest need by 50%. And she really wanted us to help her define where, how many, and what kinds of trees to plant in Los Angeles. So we started with a few pilot neighborhoods in East and South LA, represented in the map on the left-hand side. And we wanted to look at where there were kind of limited resources and limited space for trees in Los Angeles, kind of represented by that picture on the right-hand side. And to answer this question around helping decision makers direct those resources to most vulnerable areas, we had to spend some time matchmaking and finding the right multidisciplinary team at USC. So we spent some time curating the project team based on the partner's needs and identified first 3 faculty leads with expertise in GIS mapping, landscape architecture, and air quality monitoring. And then over the years, as the project grew, we expanded expertise based on new interesting research ideas, and we really pulled from remote sensing, machine learning, and more qualitative-based community engagement research. The next few slides kind of bring you a taste of what these projects look like and the questions we were trying to address. So this first one is from our GIS expertise, tapping into USC Spatial Sciences Institute. We really built methodologies and tools to help the city identify priority planting locations based on greatest need. And on the next slide, you'll see that we really prioritize community engagement through the development of these tools and design processes. And we really leaned on the support of our University Relations Office at USC to help build bridges to community groups and leaders, bring people to our workshops, and design really interactive, tactile ways of engaging with community members, as you can see in this picture, using yarn and other elements to draw their preferred routes to school and draw areas where they wanted to see trees in their community. Then we've also tested what different tree species are doing when it comes to mitigating air pollutants using expertise from our earth sciences team at USC. And then lastly, we've identified street-level interventions to find more room for trees using the expertise from our landscape architecture team and some urban planners at USC as well. So really, overall, we've guided about 950 trees and counting in East and South LA using our research, and we've attended numerous community engagement events. We've built story maps and GIS tools to accompany the 6 research publications, and counting a few more are pending review. And we've really established ourselves as trusted resources on various urban forestry-related questions in LA and beyond. And so a similar project that had this kind of scope is one in the food sector, and I'll turn it over to John Fanning to tell us more.
Thanks, Mariana. Hi, everybody. So I am a project manager at Public Exchange working on our food security project. That's a collaboration with lots of folks in Los Angeles County, including a number of LA County departments and community organizations. And this launched right at the beginning of the pandemic in April of 2020 and has grown pretty substantially since then. So similar to the Trees project, kind of our overarching goal is to develop data-driven tools and research that our partners can use to drive more effective programs and policies. And so this actually started in the pandemic because LA County was trying to distribute emergency food interventions because there was a real spike in food insecurity, and realized that the data they had to do so was several years old. And so Kate and Mariana at the time worked with our partners at the Chief Sustainability Office and really quickly stood up a research team that was able to provide the county with much more timely data than they had, and had a very tangible impact on the distribution of emergency food interventions. So the overarching challenge, though, is that was a crisis, but it was also sort of a wake-up call for LA County that food insecurity has been a huge challenge here for a really long time. It's fluctuated over the last number of years, and our team regularly monitors and publishes levels of food and nutrition insecurity. But as of last October, a quarter of LA County residents were food insecure, meaning they didn't have access to enough food or worried that they wouldn't have access to enough food to live a healthy and active life. To put that in perspective, obviously 1 in 4 is a huge number. Nationally, it's closer to 10 or 12%. So it's sort of double at least the national average. And for low-income residents and other groups, it can be as high as 41 to 44%. So it's a real crisis here. And so we've been working for the last 5 years in partnership with a number of different organizations at the county level and community level, really trying to support their efforts with real-time data and analysis. And so, as I mentioned at the top, the initial project helped to inform the distribution of 10 million pounds of food in the pandemic's first year by letting the county know who was most at risk, who was most impacted, which demographic groups, where in the county those people were. And then for the last number of years, we've been building through an NSF grant, have been building a county level data dashboard of the LA County food system that is going to be a key tool in the county has just launched a new Office of Food Systems that is implementing a 10-year food action plan. And our data dashboard is going to be adopted by this new office and is going to be kind of a key tool in implementing a lot of the action plan changes, which is really exciting. So our team is pretty large. I included this slide just to kind of show the breadth of our group, and also because a big part of what we are doing is bringing all these folks together. So on the research side, the PIs are from Kayla De La Haye is the lead researcher. She's from the director of the Dornsife Food Systems Institute. And then colleagues John Wilson and Wendy Bruin de Bruin are from the Spatial Sciences Institute and School of Public Policy. And then more broadly throughout the team, we have members from information sciences, from the medical school. So there's a really broad range of expertise that allows us to kind of engage on this issue in a really multifaceted way. We also have had longstanding partners on the team from LA County. So our colleague from the Chief Sustainability Office, who's also been part of this big LA County effort called the Food Equity Roundtable, and partners from LA Food Policy Council, which is a big kind of macro level organization working with community organizations all throughout the county. And so it's a key focus for us to make sure that this work is done in developed in partnership and also disseminated in partnership. What that actually looks like is things like this. So we've done projects that are kind of deep dives on social and behavioral issues related to food access in specific parts of the county. I mentioned earlier, we regularly release food and nutrition insecurity briefs about the state of food access in the county. And we also have capabilities to do spatial and mobility analysis to show people, where these needs are highest concentrated, and also how different mobility patterns are affecting these issues. So it's a pretty broad range of expertise. And one thing that's been really rewarding and something that we spend a lot of our time doing at Public Exchange is making sure that all this work gets where it needs to go. So this is sort of a series of screenshots of really pivotal moments in LA County over the last 5 years. As I said at the top, the pandemic was really a wake-up call for LA County that they needed to do something about food insecurity much more broadly. And so our team has paralleled and sort of become an unofficial research arm of this much larger LA County effort to address this issue. So as I said, in 2020, we helped inform the emergency food interventions. In 2021, the county stood up something called the Food Equity Roundtable that brought together people across all sectors to address this issue. In 2022, they issued the action plan, and our team's work was a part of that. In 2023, they pledged to stand up a permanent Office of Food Systems. And so at each step along the way, our team's data has always been referred to as a real driving motivator for these various efforts. And the big project we've been working on up right until now is building this food system dashboard. It's nearly complete, and we are excited to be handing it over to the new Office of Food Systems, who's implementing this 10-year strategic plan. And now that we are wrapping that up, we are continuing to figure out how we can best support all of our partners at the county who are working on food and nutrition insecurity. So we recently received funding from the Angel Foundation to work with Department of Public Social Services to help them improve and increase CalFresh enrollment by giving them really granular data and analysis about who's under enrolled and how to reach them. And then we are in the process of developing a really exciting food as medicine pilot at Keck Hospital that involves doctors from Department of Endocrinology and other places, colleagues at the USC Norris Cancer Center, as well as partners at Washington University, Department of Public Health, and Children's Hospital LA, who all have expertise and experience building and implementing food as medicine programs. So we've been spending a ton of time working across the university, but then also beyond the university to figure out how to build these programs most effectively to make sure that they have the biggest impact for the many, many residents of LA County who could benefit from them. So those are two of our longest standing projects. And then I just wanted to quickly describe two newer projects because I think they're also examples of sort of innovative ways that we've been trying to maximize the impact of the research that our colleagues are doing. So for the last couple of years, we've been working on a homelessness prevention project and kind of in a unique way in partnership with the self-storage industry. Many of our projects are driven by the research interests of our faculty partners. And one of our colleagues in the School of Social Work observed that self-storage facilities are a really high touch point for people at risk of losing their housing. Both losing your housing and renting a storage unit are kind of associated with periods of life disruption. And we spent a lot of time kind of bearing out that this is a place where a lot of people who are at risk are interacting. And as a result, maybe we can try to reach them, especially because sometimes when people are struggling, they don't necessarily have bandwidth to navigate through traditional channels. So we created a partnership with the Arizona Self-Storage Association, and Arizona State University worked with us to figure out what resource providers were best to connect people to. And we ran a small pilot in Phoenix, inserting really simple resource connections in self-storage facilities to kind of show that this is a feasible pipeline. And we are now building out the project for a much larger phase in Los Angeles, where unfortunately the scale of the problem is about 10 times what it is in Phoenix. And so this has involved a lot of partnership building with a unique industry that ultimately doesn't have to engage on this issue, but it's kind of shown up on their front door. And then also with a lot of service providers, we spent a ton of time in LA talking to, 15 different agencies working on homelessness prevention, figuring out the best pipelines to send people. And so these are the sorts of things we're doing to kind of build around the core research of our faculty partners. And one last project to mention, because it's happening in real time, is we were all here in January when the wildfires happened in Los Angeles. Some of us actually live in Northeast LA, really close to the Eaton Fire, which is one of the two biggest fires. And a huge concern in the aftermath of the fires has been, especially as kids go back to school and people move back into affected areas, has been, is it safe for people to go to school, live, work, interact in these different areas? And so we very quickly worked to stand up a project with our Earth Sciences department and colleagues at the School of Medicine to test the soil in affected areas for levels of lead to make sure that people are not spending time in high risk areas. And we stood this up really quickly because it reflected a very urgent need. And now people can send in samples from any area that they might be concerned about. It's completely free to people who do this. And we have set up drop boxes in several different parts of the county that were impacted by the fires and are very much continuing to build out this project. Lead is one of the primary points of concern, but there are other substances too that we are hoping to start testing if we can get more funding for the project. But this has been a really rapid turnaround, and I think kind of displays the sorts of projects that we're really invested in doing, pulling together the different pieces as necessary and as quickly as possible. So I will stop there and turn it back over to Kate to talk through a bit more about public exchange writ large.
Thanks, John. And thanks, Mariana, for walking us through those projects. I think something that's really exciting for us in all of these projects is that As we're able to expand the research scope, we're able to help our partners target their resources much more efficiently. So, rather than spend resources in a way that is not data-driven, the work that we're doing is allowing our partners, for example, to plant trees or distribute food in a targeted way so that they're sure that they're reaching the folks who are most in need. So with that, I want to just take just a couple minutes to talk about what we see as the value of the public exchange model having been for USC, and then of course, more broadly, the value of this model to other universities. So public exchange essentially supports sort of three different types of return on investment, if you will, to universities. They are supporting the research enterprise, generating real world impact and engaging the public, and creating student opportunities. John and Mariana talked a lot about generating real world impact and engaging the public, so I'm going to focus a little bit more on the other two metrics. I mentioned up top that we've brought in just north of 13 million to support our project work since our founding. A large percentage of that goes to the researchers who are actually doing the work. Since our launch, we have created 125 funded research opportunities for faculty, staff, and students. And this chart will give you a bit of a sense of what that breakdown looks like. As you can see, faculty and master students are the sort of highest numbers of the folks that we've worked with on our projects, with everyone else except postdocs just about even. One thing that we did not really set out to do when we started as a program, but has happened, is that we have found a real sweet spot in working with new centers, new research centers, or centers in formation. What we found is that faculty who are starting new centers are often very interested in working with us because partnerships can really help get those centers off the ground. They can publicize them and get some initial funding for research collaborations for them. We didn't really set out to do this, but we've incubated some new lines of research at USC that the university wasn't really particularly known for before. So that's been really exciting for us. As I mentioned up top, the researchers on our projects have published on just about every one of those projects. I think there was a misconception in our early days that somehow public exchange's work would be completely separate from academic research, and that has largely not been the case. We are, of course, the public exchange. Publishing is important to us, and it's important to the faculty we work with. And we are really excited about these many journal publications. We were not designed to be a student program. We are a faculty-led program, and the students who work on our projects are all selected by the lead faculty on the team. That being said, we have ended up creating some really exciting opportunities for the students that work on our team. We actually didn't track this metric until just under a year ago. So in fact, our projects may have created more opportunities for students, but we know that they have certainly created at least 15 job and internship opportunities for the students who work on our projects, sometimes very directly connected to the subject of the work, or even the opportunity is with the research partner themselves. Finally, public exchange gets its funding from a diverse mix of sources. This is, of course, especially important for us in this moment here in the United States, where federal funding for academic research is in question. I think something that definitely holds true in this moment, and maybe for the foreseeable future, is that universities are going to have to figure out how to work with a wide mix of potential funders to do this kind of important work. We've learned a lot in the past 5 years about how to do that, and we're really excited to continue developing these relationships. So with that, thank you again to the HRA team for inviting us, and to Jenny for moderating what I'm sure will be an interesting discussion. We are really excited for your questions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mariana, Kate, and John, for sharing about all the important work you're doing. We've had a couple of interesting questions come in, and I'm going to kick it off with the first one. But I want to start that by asking you, I'm going to take my moderator role and hog it for a minute, to add on to this first question. And that is, given that you all come from backgrounds in government and nonprofit work, what is one thing you think is very important for researchers to know about what it takes to do public impact research well, to do the kind of projects you're funding well, and or like something you found yourself teaching or helping researchers with along the way as you built up public exchange? And then related to that is a question someone asked about how you identify and connect with researchers at USC with relevant expertise. And are there any particular characteristics that you look for when you're partnering with faculty or connecting faculty to your external partners?
Maybe I'll take a stab at an answer, and then I would love to hear from John and Mariana, who actually, do a lot of the really day-to-day work, working closely with researchers. So I think for me, our whole team sits in the seats of our partners, right? That's all our backgrounds all come out of the types of partners that we are now working with. And I think something that we love working with our research teams on is, okay, we've got these really interesting findings. We're contextualizing them for our partners, but how do we really bridge the gap from there to giving them to the partner in a form that they can actually use, that they can sort of slice and dice or analyze in different ways, or apply different use cases to what it is that we're developing. And I think we spend a ton of time as a team thinking about how do we bridge that gap? How do we get better and better about bridging that gap from sort of research to action? And I think the researchers we work with have really sort of enjoyed the questions that we can bring to the table as people who have, as myself speaking in my former roles, have taken research reports and tried to make decisions with them. And so I think that synergy of the two different viewpoints is a really powerful one. John, Mariana, you want to speak to that?
I think a great example of this is these really short food insecurity briefs that we do once or twice a year, because as a research product, they're pretty concise, and the research that goes into them is incredibly extensive, but we work very actively to really distill the top line takeaways from the research into a very brief format, 2 to 3 pages. And it's really exciting because every time we release one, we immediately see our partners at LA Regional Food Bank using it to advocate for more support for their food assistance programs, or our partners in different county departments using it to advocate for different county programs or motions. And so, as Kate was saying, being able to zoom out slightly and really enable the researchers to stay in the deep-rooted research, but then helping them to kind of zoom out and say, okay, if somebody's in a position to act on all of this work, what are the key things that they really need to know? And literally translating those into assets that are, well designed and easy to kind of digest and act on for our partners. So.
Yeah, I'll just add briefly that's exactly right. A lot of what John and I do is research translation, taking the extensive journal publications that are produced, which have a different audience in mind, right? You need to outline your methodology thoroughly so that it could be replicable somewhere else, right? And that's something we're invested in for scale and for impact in other regions. But from a practitioner perspective, that level of detail is not what's going to resonate and not what's going to help move the needle forward when you're speaking to city council, telling people where you need trees in a particular neighborhood. And so a lot of what we do is just taking the research and translating it into something that will have that kind of punch and have that kind of impact that we're looking for at the end of the day.
So on every one of our projects, we're, when we discuss an opportunity with a partner or a set of partners, we are looking for faculty who have the right expertise, of course, are available, and that's not always a given, right? Sometimes people are on sabbatical or fully booked on other research projects. And then I think third is the sort of more intangible, which is, does the researcher really want to work on a team, right? And all the things that come along with working on a team. And we find that that the vast majority of researchers we work with are really excited actually about working with other faculty and that are bringing different disciplines to the table, because it gives everyone, I think, a much more holistic understanding of the challenge and how to solve it. But we also recognize that not all researchers want to work in teams, and that's completely okay.
Yeah.
Just, they might not want to work on public exchange projects.
I saw we had a question come in about the project manager role, and Mariana and John, you just talked a little bit about the translation role that you play, but can you say a little bit more about what's so important about this role? I shared with all of you in a prep call that in one of the grant programs I work with that supports research practice partnerships, that so often applicants who are successful and haven't budgeted for or planned for a project manager find out pretty quickly this is a critical role when you're doing partnership work. So I wonder if you could say a little bit more about that role you play and how you interact with research teams.
So I think that we spend a lot of time doing a lot of the stuff that the researchers ideally don't have to spend their time on, so they can focus on the research. So that can be, setting up meetings with potential partners, giving presentations on the work, creating the assets, managing the timelines, all of those kind of classic project management things. I also think we spend a lot of time, sometimes we sort of informally refer to ourselves as impact engineers, but we spend a lot of time thinking about, how can this work? How can we maximize the impact of this work? Whether it's through partnerships or audiences that really need to hear about this. So, for example, for this Food as Medicine project that we're developing, Food as Medicine is kind of a national movement to connect people with healthy food through the healthcare system, through, where doctors can actually prescribe like medically tailored meals or produce prescriptions. And so much goes into it. You have to work with the medical records department on getting insurance reimbursements for these programs. There's a whole national infrastructure that is kind of trying to advance this approach, that it's important to be engaged with, so that you're developing your project in a way that is going to contribute to the larger national effort. And so I spend a ton of my time navigating a lot of those channels and then kind of reporting back to the faculty researchers so that their research stays at the center, but also that it's getting to all of these other points in the constellation that they don't necessarily have the time to forge connections. So.
Great, thank you. Mariana?
Yeah, I think John put it really well. So I'll just say from my perspective, I spend a lot of time in city meetings, community gatherings, and other spaces where a researcher does not have the time or capacity to dedicate to, and probably their skill sets aren't best suited to be in those spaces anyway. So I think it's really critical for establishing credibility with our communities and with our stakeholders, but also in understanding what the data gaps and what the needs are. And so I bring that back so that we can tailor our research again for this kind of impact engineering. So really it's seeing where our expertise lies and how we can prioritize our skill sets to make this the most effective project.
One more thing, just real quick too, is I think, I don't know how many folks here are interested in this kind of work and maybe at a place where there hasn't been a lot of this effort to build up these kind of dynamics. But another thing that we do is we just spend a lot of time interfacing with other university departments, whether it's the communications teams who can disseminate the work really effectively, the advancement teams who can help us put together funding proposals, the offices of contracts and grants who can make sure that all of the administrative pieces are getting moved forward. And even if those things are available to our faculty partners, they're often really time-consuming and complex to navigate. And so we spend a lot of time trying to develop those relationships within the university too, to make the kind of whole 360 process as seamless as possible.
Which is just so critical, and not having that makes things even more complicated. It's super helpful. So we have a couple of funding questions I'm going to try to combine. But one question is very simple. I think it's an interesting one that could be helpful for folks, is the question of whether you find the funding for the projects first or find the projects and then seek the funding. And then also, if you, I'm sure there's variation in this, but if you could give a sense of how much funding is needed to launch a new project within the public exchange portfolio, and whether seed funding from sources, whether you get seed funding from sources that are specifically interested in those projects or more centralized.
So I'll take a stab at that. We, the answer is it depends. Because we have a very diversified fund model, we work with a lot of different kinds of funders. These relationships kind of evolve in different ways. So the sort of most direct, right, is when we meet with a partner and that partner has budget for the work, which is great. That is, kind of a more traditional relationship. Sometimes if we're really excited about the potential impact of the project and the partner or partners, and we have a great research team, we will go out and seek philanthropic funding together. And that takes longer, but is certainly a worthy endeavor for really exciting projects. So it really depends. We sometimes we have also a modest seed fund that we can use to get some projects off the ground. So particularly where there's a time element, like in those early days of the COVID pandemic, where we really needed to start collecting data on who was becoming newly food insecure, we brought some of our own resources to get that project off the ground. So it sort of evolves in different ways. As for the average amount of a sort of pilot public exchange project, again, it depends. We have gotten projects off the ground for as little as $9,000. I think John gave the example of we piloted our food insecurity project with a very early pilot in those early days of COVID for $9,000. And then it really depends on what the work is. I think we probably got a sense from our presentation that our work and the scientific methods involved vary extremely.
Right.
So, how many researchers are on the team? What is what are the direct costs to doing the research? But, I would say maybe a ballpark average might be, 25 to 50,000. But again, huge variance depending on.
Yeah, thank you. That's super helpful. So there are a couple of really good questions here that, again, I'm going to combine. And one is asking whether you can point to any specific aspects of your university setting, structures, roles, existing partnerships that are contributing to the success and growth of public exchange, and could this model work just as well at other universities? And then related to that, as someone else asked about how whether you could share about lessons learned about how to get this kind of project off the ground and coordinate across a large university system, because obviously that's been quite key to your success.
Yeah, so I would say in terms of the first question, I don't think that there's anything that unique about USC in this regard, except that we had a leadership champion. I mean, that was really essential to getting us off the ground. So former Dornsife College Dean Amber Miller, who is now the president of the Hewlett Foundation, was our founder. This was really her vision. And she, sort of made the things happen that need to happen to get us the initial funding and bring us into being. But that being said, I think, something that we didn't talk much about in this presentation, but I will share now, is that, the public exchange model was really designed to be a scalable model. It was designed to be able to operate at sort of a wide variety of universities and institutions. And we have actually partnered with Washington University in St. Louis. They will be launching their own public exchange in the fall of 2025. And it will be an independent but affiliated program. We'll work together as a network, both on our, on our own portfolios of projects, but also on cross-regional projects in areas of interest. And we are really fortunate to have another great champion in the form of Dean Dorian Traub, who's the dean of the Brown School of Social Work. She actually used to be a faculty member at USC. That's how we know her. And she really said, I want to bring this model to WashU. And was the sort of the spark that ignited this collaboration. So I think as long as you have a leadership champion, this is something that can be built basically anywhere. And even if you don't have a leadership champion, I think there are some things that can be done sort of more at the grassroots level that lay the groundwork for what could become a public exchange style program.
Yeah, I would just add, momentum tends to beget momentum. So, Mariana has been working in urban forestry for half a decade now. We've been working on food for a similar amount of time. But I think in both cases, starting with something really small and tangible that we could kind of contribute to the larger issue ecosystem and then building from there. Because when those small things were successful, it started to build trust with our county partners to say, hey, these guys can really provide me with data that I can really use. Or our partners within the university who would say, folks at university relations who are always talking to elected officials, like, hey, this is really tangible work that I can take and share with these elected officials that helps me in my work as well too. And so at this point, these two projects have become so embedded in these two ecosystems that, whether it's funders or potential partners, we're such a known quantity that a lot of opportunities are sort of starting to come to us. But I think just like starting with something really specific and tangible that you can deliver on. Because when something is successful, ultimately it's beneficial for everyone who is involved with it, whether it's advancement or the other researchers or the county partners. And so I think that's kind of, even if we were very fortunate to have champion in the dean role, but even still, I think starting with something really tangible and building from there is a good way to go.
Yeah, very true. I can't think of how many people told me in the first few years of public exchange, you can't build these big collaborations across schools. It'll be too hard. And we just did it. And maybe naive, or we made mistakes along the way. But once we'd done it, and once it was showing success, suddenly now there's precedent, right? We've done this. And so I think John's point is 100% correct.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Lesson from organizational sociology is institutional change is very hard, but it can happen, right? So there's a good question here about graduate students. And you mentioned that although this wasn't designed for student involvement in particular, and it sounds like undergrads are also getting involved, clearly you have master's students and doctoral students involved. So the question is, can you talk a little bit about the valuable management skills that your team might be providing, whether directly or indirectly to graduate students who are involved, and if there are any skills training opportunities that could be extended more broadly to students at USC?
We definitely have a number of graduate students on our teams, and I think really having these kind of applied research projects is very exciting for these newer generations of students, and also makes them reflect on kind of the career path they want to choose. Maybe they're not so keen to continue with traditional academic research, and maybe they're interested in pivoting more towards these other public or private sector opportunities. So that's where we've really seen, it's wonderful to see as a project manager, this kind of light bulb moment go off for our graduate students on the teams. And we've had PhD students involved through kind of traditional fall and spring semester long periods. And then we've had kind of on a semester basis, undergraduate and graduate students participate, but always kind of hired through our faculty leads. And they are the primary delegates, the folks responsible for really helping the students meet the level of research rigor that we're looking for. But a lot of what I can help them with is preparing them for presentations to our partners. And so I work one-on-one with them because we want them to have that experience and to have that audience with our city practitioners. But maybe I can help them prep slides, help them better understand how to frame research in a certain way for their target audience. So offering them those kinds of softer skill sets.
And there's just a lot of opportunities for kind of incrementally building their own portfolios of work too. Whether it's a public exchange publication or a journal publication, a lot of times the lead researchers will have some of the PhD students or other graduate students be co-authors on the publications, which builds their body of work. Similarly, Kate mentioned earlier, we often see people go and then work in other sectors. So our colleague Natasha, who's a PhD student on our food team, recently started working at the LA Food Policy Council, which works with nonprofits all throughout LA County. And so she's really been able to bridge these different sectors, and then kind of has become mutually invaluable colleague because we can talk with her about, what the nonprofit sector could benefit from. She can talk with us about new relationships or partnerships that could benefit what she's trying to build. Yeah, and there are just so many steps between getting your PhD and becoming, like a tenured faculty position. And I think these projects offer a lot of opportunities to check a number of those boxes. So
very cool, thank you. So we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to make sure to give each of you time to provide a final takeaway or a final closing thought for our audience members. And there are a few questions we didn't get to, so Mariana, John, and Kate, if you can see those, feel free to try to find a way to incorporate those into your comments. I do think this question about whether or not there are particularly departments or disciplines where you've gotten more traction from interested faculty is an interesting one. And I could imagine that there may be particular divisions that also have leadership where there really is an emphasis on support for this kind of engagement, where that might be something that makes a difference. But and here's a final, also great question about, is there anything unexpected that particularly surprised you as you built Public Exchange over the past 5 years? So apologies to everyone if we didn't get to your questions. I'm going to turn it over to Kate, Mariana, and John now for final comments.
Yeah, so maybe I'll answer that last one, which is there anything unexpected? Tons. First of all, I think that's inherent in building a new program is, you don't know what you don't know. And the sort of John's point earlier, you just kind of have to do it and build the plane while you're flying it. And that's very much what we did. I think something that I did not expect was just how much hunger there is amongst the research community for this kind of support, whether it's coming from a public exchange or another, type of program. Clearly, I think you have a real demand in the research community for doing it. We meet hundreds of researchers who want to bring their skills to, make an impact in the local community or beyond. And there just simply isn't the infrastructure inside most universities to give them that support. We were designed to be that. And I think what we hope is to see universities, across the United States and beyond, similarly build that kind of infrastructure. I think something that I am particularly really excited about and have been thinking a lot about in light of our partnership with WashU is how do we work together across institution? We've spent a lot of time building this program, figuring out how to work within USC, which is a big university. But I think the real power of the public exchange idea and model is working across institutions and figuring out streamlined ways for academic institutions to build really powerful projects together. I think we are more than the sum of our parts if we can figure out how to do that really well. So that's what I'm really excited about.
Thanks so much, Kate.
I kind of similarly wanted to share how exciting and surprising it was to see researchers so energized and excited about getting their work into people's hands and making more tangible change. These are like traditional, chemists who have for a long time been stuck in their labs, who are now working with a nursery in South LA to train them on what trees are doing when it actually comes to mitigating air pollutants. And there's just a real joy and excitement in bringing research outside of our kind of ivory towers and into the public realm. And so I wanted to emphasize that researchers can't do that alone, and they're best at what they're trained to do, but with a little help from staff and folks like John, Kate, and myself, that you can really turn traditional research into more of this applied research and have an impact way beyond our campus walls.
Yeah, and I would just encourage people to really lean into your instincts, especially those of you who are experts in your subject matter. If there's some sort of gap that you feel like is just going unaddressed or unacknowledged, you're probably not the only one that feels that way. So, in our food work, we noticed that there's about 300,000 people in LA County who are eligible for CalFresh, but not enrolled. And then we set up a meeting and talked to the county department that administers CalFresh. And it turned out that they do amazing work, but they didn't have the level of granularity in terms of data about who those people were. And so it was a really exciting opportunity to leverage some of the resources that we have available to our team to help fill a gap that everyone was kind of aware of, but not necessarily hadn't mobilized, effort to address. And I think, a couple of people asked about building projects across different universities, or, I think not every research question is going to lend itself to this kind of work where there's an immediate partner that can implement it. Not every project is going to make sense to do at a huge scale. But I think, again, building something small, the more universities, the more departments you bring in, the more bureaucracy there is, but also the more levers there are to maximize the impact of the work. And so doing these things incrementally, I think, over the longer run is a great way to approach it.
Well, thank you so much. I think we've all learned a lot today. Thank you for the good work you do at Public Exchange, and thank you for sharing with us. And thank you to all for joining us. And I'm sure you'll be hearing soon about the next High Bar webinar. Take care, everyone.